When my own sister started telling our friends that I was losing my mind, I did not get angry. I just smiled, thanked her for her concern, and quietly began to build a trap right under her nose, a masterpiece of truth and humiliation. By the time she understood what I was really creating in my workshop, her reputation was ruined, and the very people she had poisoned against me were watching her fall. Some legacies are built to last, and I was about to prove mine was indestructible. My plan was simple, but the result was devastating for them. Before I reveal the next step, please subscribe to the channel and share in the comments how you would handle a betrayal from your own family. My name is Stanley Croft, and at 68 years old, my world is contained within the walls of this historic Charleston, South Carolina, home that I shared with my late wife, Clara, for 42 wonderful years. Every inch of this house, from the sweeping double piazzas that catch the salty evening breeze to the heart pine floors that still hold the faint scent of Clara's lemon polish, is a testament to our shared life and my lifelong passion as an architect. My days are structured with a quiet precision that some might call obsession, but I call it devotion. Each morning, I walk the perimeter, checking the foundation for any signs of dampness from the humid air. I polish the silver, not because it needs it every day, but because Clara's grandmother brought it over from England, and I can still see the joy on Clara's face when she used it for our dinner parties. This house is not a collection of wood and brick to me. It is a living, breathing vessel of memory. My younger sister Brenda, however, sees things differently. She called her weekly visits doting on her poor, widowed older brother. She always arrived on Tuesdays at precisely 10 o'clock, carrying a basket of health muffins that tasted of sawdust and false virtue, her face arranged in a mask of practiced pity. "Stanley, dear, did you remember the blue pill is for the morning, not the evening?" she would ask, her voice dripping with a syrupy concern that made my skin crawl as she fussed with the pill organizer I kept on the counter purely for her. "Benefit. And are you sure you should be climbing that ladder to clean the gutters? You know how your balance has been. Let's have someone else handle that from now on, shall we?" It was a masterful performance of love, but I saw it for what it truly was, a slow, methodical campaign to paint me as a frail, forgetful, and incompetent old man. Just last week, I was standing in the front garden, sketching the intricate ironwork of the balcony for a project I was considering, when our neighbor, Mr. Abernathy, walked by. Brenda, who had just arrived, rushed to his side and whispered loudly. Enough for me to hear. "He just stands there for hours, you know, just staring at the house. I'm so worried he's getting lost in the past." She believed my grief over Clara's passing 2 years ago had unmoored me, that my quiet, meticulous habits were no longer signs of a disciplined architect, but of encroaching senility. The truth was far simpler and far more vulgar. She never saw this house as a home. She only saw it as a prime piece of real estate on the Charleston waterfront, $1 million teardown blocking her early retirement. I knew exactly what she wanted. She wanted a doctor's signature on a piece of paper, a legal declaration of my incompetence that would give her power of attorney, the absolute control to sell my life's work from under me for a quick and hefty profit. So I smiled and let her believe her insidious plan was working. I let her rearrange my kitchen cupboards so that I would seem confused when I couldn't find the coffee mugs. I let her tell our friends at the Historical Society that I was becoming too forgetful to manage my own affairs. I absorbed every condescending word, every patronizing gesture, and filed it away, using each insult as another line in the blueprint for her spectacular downfall. After she left on Tuesday, her car kicking up dust as she sped away, I retreated to my study, the one room in the house she never dared to enter, dismissing it as Stanley's dusty old office. It was my sanctuary, the place where my mind was not foggy or forgetful, but a finely tuned instrument. It was the same mind that had designed the Beaufort County Public Library, with its soaring atrium and wave-like roof. It was the same mind that had restored 3 of Charleston's most iconic heritage buildings. The room smelled of graphite, old paper, and the faint, clean scent of wood glue. And here, in the quiet, focused solitude, I began my real work. I locked the door, pulled down the shades, and unrolled the original 50-year-old blueprints of this very house. My hands, which Brenda claimed were too shaky to hold a cup of tea, moved with steady precision across the aged paper. She thought. My mind was a crumbling facade. She was about to find out it was a fortress, and I had just locked the gates. If you want to know how I turned this around, stay with me until the end. Brenda's campaign escalated the following month. She began calling me every morning, her voice a cheerful, interrogating chirp. "Just checking in, Stanley. Did you sleep well? Any strange dreams?" Each question was a tiny probe, searching for a crack in my composure. The muffins were replaced by pamphlets for upscale senior living communities, which she would leave casually on the coffee table, tucked inside a magazine. "Look at this one, dear," she said one Tuesday, pointing to a picture of a sterile, hotel-like room. "It has a wonderful social calendar. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." I simply smiled and thanked her, placing the brochure neatly on a pile with the others, a growing monument to her avarice. Her masterstroke came in the form of a scheduled doctor's appointment. "I took the liberty of booking a checkup with Dr. Martin," she announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. "He specializes in geriatric wellness. I've already spoken to him about some of my concerns." The audacity of it was breathtaking, but I saw the opportunity it presented. "That's very thoughtful of you, Brenda," I said, feigning a touch of weary gratitude. "Perhaps you're right. It's probably for the best." On the day of the appointment, she drove me, insisting my own driving was becoming erratic. In Dr. Martin's office, a room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper, Brenda did all the talking. She sat on the edge of her chair, a portrait of worried devotion, recounting fabricated anecdotes of my supposed decline. She described my meticulous architectural sketches as obsessive doodling. She twisted my daily inspections of the house's structural integrity into a paranoid delusion, telling the doctor I believed the walls were crumbling around me. "He just seemed so lost, doctor," she concluded, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "He misplaces things constantly. The other day, he couldn't find his car keys for an hour." I sat quietly, allowing her to weave her narrative. When Dr. Martin turned to me, his expression a blend of professional sympathy and clinical interest, I played my part. "I'm not sure what she's talking about with the keys," I said, looking genuinely confused. "But I have been feeling a bit scattered since Clara passed. Was her birthday in April or May? I can't seem to recall this year. Clara's birthday was in October." I knew that as well as I knew my own name, but the flicker of triumph in Brenda's eyes told me my performance was a success. Dr. Martin made a note on his pad. "Grief can certainly manifest as cognitive stress, Mr. Croft," he said kindly. "We'll run a few memory tests today." I could feel Brenda's victory hanging in the air. The seeds of doubt were not just planted, they were being watered by a medical professional. Not everyone was so easily fooled. A few days later, at a meeting for the Charleston Historical Society, I ran into Eleanor Vance, a sharp-witted woman who had been a dear friend to both me and Clara. Brenda immediately cornered her by the refreshment table. "Eleanor, it's a blessing you're here," Brenda began in a stage whisper. "I'm so worried about Stanley. He's just not himself." Eleanor, holding a small porcelain cup of tea, looked over at me and then back at Brenda, her eyes missing nothing. "Really?" she said, her voice dry. "He just spent 20 minutes giving me a flawless analysis of the structural deficiencies. in the new City Hall proposal. He seems more himself than most of the city council. Brenda's smile tightened, but she quickly recovered, patting Eleanor's arm. That's his pride talking. He's good at putting on a brave face. But the interaction gave me strength. Not everyone was content to accept my sister's lies. The gaslighting at home continued. One morning I found my wallet, which I always keep on the hall table, inside the refrigerator. Another day, an important letter from my lawyer regarding the estate's annual filings was missing from my desk, only to reappear a week later under a stack of old newspapers, making me miss a deadline. Each incident was designed to make me question my own mind, to build a portfolio of confusion she could present to the doctor. Each night, after the performance of being a doddering old man was done, I would retreat to my sanctuary. The study was the one place where I was truly Stanley Croft, architect, widower, and a man quietly building his revenge. I had cleared my largest drafting table, and on it, a miracle of precision was taking shape. I was not just building a model of the house, I was resurrecting it in miniature. Using architectural-grade balsa wood and a surgeon's scalpel, I cut each floorboard to scale. I spent an entire week recreating the intricate pattern of the guest bathroom's tile floor from tiny, hand-painted squares of ceramic I sourced. Miniature bricks, and aged them with a custom wash of ink and water to perfectly match the sun-faded patina of the real thing. One evening, as I worked on the tiny functional brass hinges for the model's front door, I caught the scent of Claris, night-blooming jasmine wafting in from the garden. I paused, my hands still, and looked at a photograph of her on my desk. In it, she was laughing, her head thrown back, standing on the very porch I was now painstakingly recreating. The grief was still a physical ache, a hollowness in my chest. But now it was mixed with a cold, hard resolve. Brenda was not just trying to steal a house. She was trying to erase the last tangible piece of my life with Clara. She was trying to declare our legacy null and void. I picked up my tools. My work had to be perfect. It had to be undeniable. She was building a case against my mind, but I was building the evidence that would destroy her. Before you see how my project takes shape, please hit the like button. It tells me you want more. Let me know in the comments. What's the most devious thing you think a family member could do? The betrayal was unveiled, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, devastatingly official-looking envelope that arrived on a humid Charleston morning. I had just finished my daily walk around the garden, noting that the magnolias were about to bloom, when I saw the letter in the mailbox. It was not from a friend or a colleague. It was from a law firm I did not recognize, a name in embossed, serious-looking font. I took it into the kitchen, the very room where Brenda had tried to convince me I was losing my faculties, and slid it open with the silver letter opener Clara had given me for my 50th birthday. My hands were perfectly steady. The letter was a formal petition, a legal document filed with the county court. In cold, typed words, it requested a competency hearing for Stanley Croft, citing concerns of cognitive decline, memory loss, and an inability to manage his personal and financial affairs. The petitioner was my sister, Brenda Croft, but it was the attachments that truly took my breath away. Stapled to the back was a signed statement from Dr. Martin. It was a carefully worded, professional opinion, but its implications were clear. He noted my apparent confusion during our visit, my difficulty with recent memory recall, and my anxious, obsessive focus on my property. He recommended a full psychiatric evaluation to determine if a legal guardian was necessary. For my well-being. My own words, twisted and taken out of context, were being used as a weapon against me. The lie about Clara's birthday, the feigned confusion about my keys, all of it was there, recorded as clinical evidence. The second attachment was even more insidious. It was a collection of signed affidavits from neighbors and even a few acquaintances from the Historical Society. I read the names, my heart growing colder with each one. Mr. Abernathy's statement recounted the time I was staring blankly at the house. Another, from a woman I had known for 20 years, mentioned how I seemed distant and sad. At a recent luncheon, Brenda had been busy. She had taken their genuine human concern and weaponized it, twisting their words into a chorus of agreement with her narrative. She had curated a portfolio of my supposed madness. The final page was a preliminary appraisal of my property, conducted by a real estate agent known for quick, aggressive sales. The number listed was astronomical, a figure that would tempt a saint, let alone a woman as greedy as my sister. There it was, in black and white, the full scope of her plan. It was no longer just a suspicion. It was a legal assault. She was not just trying to sell my house. She was trying to steal my life, my autonomy, my very identity as a capable man. The immediate consequence was a feeling of profound, chilling isolation. For a moment, sitting there in the sunlit kitchen, I felt the weight of her campaign. The doctor, the neighbors, the law, all of it was aligned against me. Anyone looking at this file would see a concerned sister trying to help a deteriorating brother. They would not see the lie, the manipulation, the cold-blooded avarice that fueled it. The phone rang, and I knew instinctively it was her. I let it ring twice before answering, affecting a tone of mild confusion. "Stanley, dear, did you get some mail today?" she asked, her voice laced with that familiar, false sweetness. "I just wanted you to know that I'm doing this because I love you. This is for your own good. We just need to make sure you're safe." I looked down at the legal petition on my table. "My own good," I repeated softly, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I wanted to scream at her, to unleash the torrent of cold rage that was building inside me. I wanted to tell her I knew everything, but that was not the plan. The architect in me, the man who understood that a structure's strength comes from its foundation, knew that a premature move would be disastrous. My revenge needed to be built as carefully as the house she was trying to steal. "I'm a little tired, Brenda," I said, my voice quiet. "I think I need to rest." I hung up the phone before she could reply. For the rest of the day, I did not go to my study. I did not work on my masterpiece. Instead, I walked through the rooms of my home that was now officially in jeopardy. I ran my hand along the smooth, cool marble of the fireplace mantel Clara and I had chosen together in Italy. I stood in the library and looked at the shelves of books, each one a memory of a time or a place. I saw my entire life, our entire life, being appraised, catalogued, and prepared for liquidation. The feeling of violation was absolute. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the polished floors, the cold isolation began to burn away, replaced by something else. A fire. The same fire I felt as a young, ambitious architect facing an impossible design challenge. She had filed her petition. She had laid out her evidence. She thought the structure of her lie was sound. She had no idea I had been building my own case for months, a case made not of lies and twisted words, but of wood, glue, and irrefutable miniature truth. The competency hearing was scheduled in 6 weeks. Brenda had given me a deadline, and I would use every single second of it. The betrayal was now complete. The war had officially begun. What do you think happens when someone underestimates the quiet ones? Comment below if you've ever seen someone's patience snap. The morning after the petition arrived, I awoke not with despair, but with a crystalline, diamond-hard clarity. The time for feigned confusion and quiet observation was over. The time for action had arrived. I walked into my study, the legal. Documents from Brenda's lawyer held firmly in my hand, and laid them on the corner of my drafting table. right next to the miniature, half-finished masterpiece. They were two competing blueprints, hers a map of deceit, mine a testament to truth. My first call was not to a lawyer, but to Eleanor Vance. I invited her for coffee that same morning, knowing I needed an ally, someone whose perception was as sharp as her wit. She arrived looking concerned, her keen eyes taking in the legal envelope on my hall table. "Stanley, what's happened?" she asked, forgoing any pleasantries. I did not prevaricate. I poured her a coffee, sat her down in the drawing room, and handed her the entire petition. I watched her read, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief, and finally to a slow-burning indignation. "That venomous woman," she breathed, placing the papers down on the table as if they were contaminated. "She's twisted every kind word, every worried glance from your friends into a weapon. This is monstrous." Her immediate belief in me, her refusal to even entertain the lie, was the first brick I needed to rebuild my foundation. "I have a plan, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady. "But I cannot do it alone. I need your help." I spent the next hour laying out my strategy, the public unveiling, the fundraiser, the masterpiece in the study. She listened intently, a smile slowly spreading across her face. "Stanley Croft, you are a wicked, brilliant man," she declared when I finished. "Consider the Charleston Historical Society at your disposal. We will co-host a fundraiser that this city will talk about for years. And I will personally make sure every person who signed these wretched affidavits is on the guest list." With Eleanor handling the social and logistical side, I could focus on the two most critical fronts, the legal battle and the completion of my secret weapon. My next call was to my own lawyer, a sharp young man named Thomas, who had taken over his father's practice. I met him that afternoon. "They're trying to paint a narrative of incompetence," Thomas said, his brow furrowed as he reviewed the petition. "The best way to fight a narrative isn't with a denial, it's with a better story." This confirmed my own instincts. I explained the fundraiser, the scale model, and the public demonstration of my faculties. Thomas's eyes lit up. "A live performance of competency," he mused. "It's unorthodox, but in a case like this, it could be devastatingly effective. It makes their legal arguments look clinical and cruel in the face of living proof." We agreed on a strategy. We would not fight the hearing directly, we would delay it. Thomas would file a response requesting more time to gather our own medical and personal testimony, positioning the hearing to take place 1 week after the scheduled fundraiser. We were setting the stage for Brenda's legal ambush to be preempted by her public humiliation. With the legal and social gears turning, I dedicated myself entirely to my work in the study. The model became my world. I worked with the focus of a watchmaker, my hands steady, my mind clear. I spent 3 days recreating the delicate spindles of the main staircase, each one carved from a single piece of basswood. I installed a miniature electrical system, wiring tiny LED bulbs into the chandeliers and wall sconces, each one casting a warm, realistic glow, all controlled by a hidden switchboard. I was not just building a model, I was embedding it with memory. I remembered the night Clara and I had argued playfully over the color of the dining room walls, a debate we settled by mixing the two paints together. I spent hours at my workbench, mixing tiny pots of acrylic paint until I had the exact shade of pale, seafoam green, and then I carefully painted the walls of the miniature dining room. I remembered the faint scorch mark on the floor by the library fireplace left by a rogue ember during a winter storm in 1992. With the tip of a heated needle, I seared a tiny, perfect scorch mark onto the miniature heart pine floorboards. This model was becoming more than evidence. It was becoming my testimony. My days fell into a new, intense rhythm. In the mornings, I would play the part of the slightly befuddled old man for Brenda's benefit. When she called, I would sound distracted, misremembering names or dates. I even accidentally left the garden hose running one afternoon, when I knew she was about to stop by, allowing her to find the flooded flower bed and cluck her tongue in manufactured sympathy. She was so confident, so sure of her victory, that she never saw the truth. She never noticed the faint scent of sawdust clinging to my clothes, or the small flecks of paint under my fingernails. She never questioned why the study door was always locked. She saw only what she wanted to see: a man fading away, a house ripe for the picking. One evening, I sat back from my work, the entire magnificent structure of the house now complete before me. It was perfect. A flawless 1/12th scale recreation of my life. But it was still just a shell. The trap was not yet set. I opened a small, velvet-lined box on my desk. Inside were the components for the final, most crucial part of the plan. Tiny microphones, disguised as architectural details. A miniature, high-resolution camera, hidden in a bookshelf. And a hidden spring-loaded compartment in the model's foundation, perfectly sized to hold a stack of documents. The time for building was almost over. The time for catching a predator in her own trap was about to begin. Before we continue, a quick question for you. Please hit the like button if you are enjoying the story, and tell me in the comments, do you think revenge is always best served cold? Or is there a time for a fiery confrontation? With the fundraiser date set and the legal delaying tactics in motion, the next phase of my plan began, a delicate operation of baiting and recording. The first step was to get Brenda's overconfidence on tape. I knew she couldn't resist boasting, especially if she believed I was too far gone to understand. With Eleanor's help, we arranged a small, seemingly impromptu lunch at a quiet downtown restaurant known for its private booths. Eleanor invited Brenda, framing it as a chance for them to catch up and for Eleanor to better understand how to support me. I, of course, was also invited, the pitiable subject of their discussion. I arrived a few minutes late, as planned, and played my part to perfection. I ordered the wrong entree, seemed to lose my train of thought mid-sentence, and even mistook the waitress for a niece of an old friend. Brenda was in her element, sighing dramatically and patting my hand with condescending affection. The tiny, high-fidelity recorder in Eleanor's handbag captured everything. "He's just slipping away, Eleanor," Brenda said, her voice a low, confidential hum. "The doctors say it's a classic case. It's a mercy, really. Selling the house is the only way to ensure he has the funds for proper, round-the-clock care. He can't be trusted with his own finances anymore. It would be irresponsible." Eleanor, a masterful actress herself, nodded sympathetically. "But the house means so much to him. Are you sure he'll agree?" Brenda let out a small, triumphant laugh. "Oh, he won't have to agree. Once the court appoints me as his guardian, the decision will be mine. It's just a formality at this point. His mind is a sieve." The recording was gold, a clear statement of her intent, stripped of the syrupy concern she performed for everyone else. Securing that evidence felt like laying the cornerstone of a new foundation. The next part of the plan required a more technical execution. I needed to document her actions within the house itself. I purchased a set of discrete, motion-activated security cameras, the kind that look like ordinary household objects. A digital clock for the living room, a phone charger for the hall, and a smoke detector for my study. Over the next 2 weeks, they captured a damning portrait of her duplicity. I watched the footage each night. I saw her on Tuesday, after she thought I had gone for a walk, snooping through my desk drawers, her hands moving with a quick, furtive energy. I saw her on Friday, when she let herself in with the key I had misplaced and she had found, taking photographs of the valuable antiques in each room, no doubt for the benefit of her real estate agent. The camera in the study even caught her trying the locked door, her face tightening with frustration when it would not budge. Each video file was another brick in the wall of evidence I was building against her. The work on the model itself entered its final, most intricate stage. I was no longer just an architect. I was a stage designer, preparing for a grand performance. I hollowed out a miniature book on one of the library shelves and fitted it with a tiny camera lens, aimed perfectly at the spot where I would be standing during my presentation. I disguised the microphones as elegant miniature lamps on the drawing room mantelpiece. The hidden compartment in the model's foundation was fitted with a silent, spring-loaded mechanism, ready to present the documented proof of her scheme at the flick of a hidden switch. The invitations for the Evening of Architectural Heritage, co-hosted by myself and the Charleston Historical Society, went out. Eleanor had designed them herself on beautiful, cream-colored cardstock. They were elegant, official, and irresistible to Charleston's social and cultural elite. As she predicted, the RSVPs poured in. Everyone would be there. Dr. Martin, Mr. Abernathy, the members of the Historical Society who had signed her affidavits. The entire cast of the drama she had directed was about to become the audience for my final act. 2 weeks before the event, Brenda called, her voice practically vibrating with excitement. "Stanley, Eleanor told me about your little fundraiser. Isn't that wonderful? But are you sure you're up to it, dear? All those people, the noise, it might be too much for you." I could hear the unspoken thought behind her words. She was envisioning the scene, her frail, confused brother babbling incoherently in front of Charleston's most influential citizens, the final, undeniable proof she needed for the competency hearing. "I think I can manage," I said softly. "Eleanor is handling all the details. I just have to say a few words." "Well, I'll be right by your side to help you through it," she cooed. "You won't have to worry about a thing." I knew she would be. She wouldn't miss her own coronation for the world. In the final days leading up to the party, I felt a strange sense of calm. The model was finished, a perfect gleaming jewel sitting under a silk drape in my study. The evidence was compiled, the recordings transcribed, the video clips edited, into a short, devastating montage. My speech was written, every word chosen with an architect's precision. Everything was in place. I was a builder who had laid a perfect foundation, constructed a flawless frame, and was now just waiting for the unsuspecting occupant to walk through the front door. The night before the fundraiser, I stood in the garden, looking up at the house. The lights were on, casting a warm glow from the windows, the same glow that had welcomed me home for 42 years. Brenda thought she was fighting for a piece of real estate. She never understood that I was fighting for the soul of my life. She was about to learn the difference. How do you feel when a carefully laid plan is about to be executed? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like the video if you're ready for the climax. The evening of the fundraiser arrived on a perfect Charleston night, the air warm and sweet with the scent of jasmine and salt. My home, a place that had recently felt like a battleground, was transformed. String lights twinkled in the branches of the ancient oaks, and inside, soft classical music drifted through rooms filled with the low hum of polite conversation. The city's most influential figures mingled, sipping champagne and admiring the architecture, blissfully unaware they were standing on a stage set for war. Brenda was a whirlwind of performative concern, flitting from group to group, a tragic heroine in a silk dress. She stayed close to my side, her hand often gripping my arm a little too tightly, as if to steady the poor, frail brother she was. So bravely supporting. I saw her speaking in hushed tones to Dr. Martin, her face a mask of sorrow. I watched her guide Mr. Abernathy to a chair, explaining that I tired easily. To anyone watching, she was the picture of selfless devotion. I, in turn, played my part one last time. I seemed a bit overwhelmed by the crowd. I greeted a city councilman by the wrong name. I allowed Brenda to gently guide me through conversations, letting her complete my sentences when I appeared to falter. The trap was being primed, her confidence swelling with every perceived stumble. At precisely 8 o'clock, Eleanor Vance stepped onto a small, discreetly placed riser in the main drawing room and tapped a glass for attention. The crowd fell silent. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice clear and commanding. "We are so thrilled to have you here to support the Historical Society. But tonight is also a celebration of this magnificent house and the brilliant man who has been its devoted custodian. I'd like to introduce my dear friend Stanley Croft." A wave of polite applause rippled through the room. Brenda shot me a look of panicked sympathy and whispered, "Just a few words, Stanley. I'll be right here if you get lost." She squeezed my arm, a final gesture of control. I walked to the front of the room, standing beside a large object covered by a rich, dark velvet cloth. I looked out at the sea of faces, my sister's anxious, predatory smile, Dr. Martin's clinical gaze, the curious and pitying eyes of my neighbors. "Thank you, Eleanor," I began, my voice deliberately soft and a little shaky. "Thank you all for coming. This house has been my life. My wife, Clara, and we filled it with memories." I paused, letting the silence hang, letting them see the confused old man they expected. And my voice changed. The tremor vanished, replaced by the crisp, confident tone of a seasoned architect presenting his life's work. "But a house is more than memory," I declared, my voice now ringing with authority. "It is a structure, a design, a complex system of details that must be understood and respected." With a theatrical flourish, I pulled the velvet cloth away. A collective gasp swept through the room. There it was, the scale model, illuminated by its own internal lights. A breathtaking, perfect jewel of a creation. It was not a hobbyist's dollhouse. It was a piece of architectural art, flawless in every detail. "For the past several months," I continued, my voice firm and clear, "some have suggested my mind is not what it used to be, that my memory is failing, that I am lost in a fog of grief." I looked directly at Brenda, whose smile had frozen on her face, a rictus of confusion. So I decided to build something to prove them wrong. This is a 1/12 scale model of this very house, built entirely from memory and the original blueprints. For the next 15 minutes, I gave the performance of my life. I led the audience on a tour of the miniature house, my narrative a seamless blend of architectural detail and personal history. The foundation is Savannah brick, laid in a common bond pattern, chosen for its resilience to our humid climate, I explained, pointing with a long, steady finger. Clara and I selected it in the spring of 1978. I described the cantilevered staircase, the physics of its construction, and recounted the story of the day it was installed. I detailed the precise chemical composition of the custom mixed paint in the dining room, the very shade I had recreated from a memory of a playful argument with my wife. I moved with a fluid, confident energy, my mind a steel trap of facts, dates, and loving details. The crowd was mesmerized. Their pity had turned to awe. I watched Dr. Martin's eyes widen, his clinical certainty visibly dissolving. I saw Mr. Abernathy lean forward, his mouth slightly agape. Brenda's face had gone from confused to pale, a dawning horror in her eyes as she realized her carefully constructed narrative was being dismantled, piece by tiny, perfect piece. Then I delivered the final, crushing blow. "But a house also has its secrets," I said, my voice dropping to a dramatic hush. "And so does this one." I reached under the model's base and flicked a hidden switch. A small, near-silent, spring-loaded drawer slid out from the foundation. From it, I produced a small stack of papers and a remote control. My sister Brenda has been very concerned about my well-being," I said, my eyes locking onto hers. The color drained from her face completely. So concerned, in fact, that she has petitioned the court to have me declared incompetent so she can sell this home. Murmurs of shock and disbelief rippled through the room. I held up the remote. "She has said many things to many people, and modern technology is a wonderful thing for an old man with a failing memory." I pressed a button. Brenda's voice, sharp and clear, filled the silent room from speakers hidden within the model. "Oh, he won't have to agree. Once the court appoints me as his guardian, the decision will be mine. It's just a formality at this point. His mind is a sieve." A audio recording of her conversation with Eleanor was followed by a short video that appeared on a small hidden screen on the side of the model. It showed her, clear as day, snooping through my private desk. I did not need to narrate. The evidence spoke for itself. Every eye in the room turned from the model to my sister. She stood frozen, a statue of pure, unadulterated humiliation. Her lies exposed, her greed lay bare for all to see. Her plan was not just ruined, it was annihilated in a public spectacle of her own making. She had tried to frame me as a madman in a crumbling house, but I had proven that the only thing crumbling was her character. The trap had sprung. Her defeat was absolute. Has justice ever tasted so sweet? Hit the subscribe button if you agree. And let me know in the comments what you think Brenda will do next. The silence that followed the end of the recording was the most profound I have ever experienced. It was thick and heavy, broken only by the faint, cheerful chirping of the crickets outside, a sound that seemed to mock the ruin that had just occurred within my walls. Brenda stood as if turned to stone, her face a ghastly shade of white, her eyes wide with the sheer, unblinking horror of total exposure. The guests, her audience, her jury, were no longer looking at her with pity or concern, but with a mixture of shock, disgust, and cold, unforgiving judgment. Dr. Martin was the first to react. He cleared his throat, a small, awkward sound in the vast silence, and took a deliberate step away from her, a physical act of disassociation. Mr. Abernathy simply shook his head slowly, a look of deep regret on his face. But it was Eleanor Vance who delivered the final, unspoken verdict. She walked calmly over to Brenda, her expression not of anger, but of a kind of regal disappointment, and simply took the champagne glass from her limp, unresisting hand. No words were needed. The gesture was clear. You are no longer welcome here. Brenda seemed to crumble in on herself. Without a word, without a single glance in my direction, she turned and fled. She did not walk. She scurried, weaving through the stunned crowd like a frightened animal, out the front door and into the darkness. The sound of her car starting and speeding away was the only farewell. The party, of course, was over. The guests began to leave in quiet, somber groups, many of them stopping to offer me a brief, sincere apology on their way out. "Stanley, I am so sorry," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice heavy with shame. She twisted my concern into something ugly. I should have known better. I simply nodded, accepting their apologies with a quiet grace. I held no malice toward them. They were merely pawns in her vicious game. The next morning, I received a call from Thomas, my lawyer. "Stanley," he said, a note of deep satisfaction in his voice, "I just received a call from Brenda's legal counsel. They are formally withdrawing their petition. It's over." It was a quiet, anticlimactic end to a war that had felt so personal. There were no more battles to fight. I had won. Life after the fundraiser returned to a new kind of normal. The quiet precision of my days remained, but it was no longer a defensive posture. It was a celebration. I woke each morning and walked through my home, not as a custodian guarding against a threat, but as its undisputed master, free and at peace. The The house itself seemed to breathe easier, its halls no longer echoing with the whispers of my sister's lies. I re-engaged with my life with a renewed vigor. I accepted a position on the board of the Charleston Historical Society, where my architectural expertise was not just respected but celebrated. I started taking on small, meaningful restoration projects, consulting on the preservation of the city's heritage, the very thing my sister had tried to convince me I was incapable of appreciating. I found joy in the work, in the challenge, in using my mind for creation rather than for defense. I heard snippets of news about Brenda through the city's ever-present grapevine. She had put her own house on the market and was planning to move to Florida. She had been ostracized from the social circles she had worked so hard to cultivate. Her public humiliation had been so absolute, so complete, that Charleston had become too small a town for her to hide in. I felt no triumph in this news, only a distant, clinical sense of cause and effect. She had built her own prison of shame, and now she was serving her sentence. One crisp autumn afternoon, several months later, I was in my study, sketching plans for the restoration of a historic church steeple. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the magnificent scale model that now held a permanent place of honor in the room. It was no longer a weapon. It was a work of art, a monument not to my revenge, but to my resilience. There was a knock at the door. I found a small package on the porch. Inside was a simple, handwritten note and a small, heavy object wrapped in tissue paper. The note was from Dr. Martin. It read, "Mr. Croft, there is no excuse for my poor judgment. I allowed myself to be manipulated, and I failed in my professional duty to you. Please accept my sincerest apology." I unwrapped the object. It was a beautiful, antique silver compass, the kind used by draftsmen and architects decades ago. It was a gesture of profound respect, an acknowledgement from one professional to another. I placed the compass on my desk, beside the photograph of Clara. My revenge was never about destroying Brenda. It was about preserving my life, my dignity, and the legacy I had built with my wife. The ultimate victory was not in her downfall, but in my own quiet, peaceful, and unassailable freedom. It was in the simple, profound joy of standing in my own home, master of my own mind, surrounded by the life that I had fought for and won. That is how I got my so sweet revenge, and I would do it all over again. Thank you for following my story to the end. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment telling me what part of Stanley's plan you found the most satisfying.